The alien princess asked for human help, but she didn't expect to fall for him. The waters of Meos, a planet veiled in perpetual twilight beneath an endless ocean, shimmered with bioluminescent hues. Ancient spires of coral and crystal reached out from the ocean floor, their glimmering surfaces marred by cracks and decay. The city of Clarus, once the pinnacle of Merosian civilization, now groaned under the weight of its failing infrastructure. Princess Aurea, heir to the throne, stood at the edge of the Grand Aquadome, her translucent fins quivering as she gazed at the city. The tension in the currents mirrored her unease. Her people were proud, self-reliant, and fiercely traditional, yet they were at the brink of collapse. She had done the unthinkable, reached out to Earth for aid. A whisper in the water made her turn. Her chief advisor, Vorin, a stoic figure whose luminous scales reflected his age and wisdom, hovered nearby. "They are here, Your Highness," he said, his voice a low hum carried by the currents. "The humans." Aurea's gills fluttered in apprehension. "Let us meet them," she replied, adjusting the flowing bioluminescent robes that marked her royal station. Despite her resolve, a pang of doubt flickered in her chest. Would these surface dwellers truly help her people? Or would their intervention only hasten the end? Max Carter adjusted the seals on his environment suit, his movements methodical and deliberate. The experimental exosuit, crafted by Earth's finest minds, was the only thing keeping him alive in the crushing depths of Meos oceans. Around him, the rest of the Earth delegation, diplomats, scientists, and technicians, were busy unloading supplies from their submersible craft. Max didn't bother joining the chatter. He wasn't here to talk. He was here to fix things. A reputation as one of Earth's most brilliant civil engineers had landed him the job, but it was his tendency to buck authority that had made him a last-minute addition to the team. Max Carter didn't play by the rules, and that had made him both indispensable and a liability. "Carter," barked Dr. Amelia Vargas, the head diplomat, "keep your opinions to yourself in front of the locals. We're guests here." Max smirked. "Relax. Document. I'll be on my best behavior." The hatch hissed open, revealing a shimmering aquamarine world. As the Earth delegation descended into the heart of Clarus, Max felt a pang of awe. Despite its dilapidation, the city was stunning, a network of coral towers, luminescent pathways, and sprawling plazas suspended in the water like a dream. The sheer scale of the Merosian civilization dwarfed anything on Earth. Waiting for them was Princess Aurea, her regal posture framed by a retinue of guards and advisors. Her bioluminescent eyes locked onto Max, and for a brief moment, he forgot how to breathe. She was stunning, her features delicate but commanding, her skin shimmering like moonlight on water. "Welcome to Clarus," she said, her voice melodic but tinged with urgency. "You honor us with your presence." Max stepped forward before Vargas could interject. "Name's Max Carter. Heard you've got a city that needs saving." The princess blinked, her expression unreadable. "Indeed, Mr. Carter. Let us hope you are as capable as your reputation suggests." The tension between the Earth delegation and the Merosian Council was palpable. Aurea sat at the head of the Grand Chamber, her advisors flanking her, while the humans presented their initial findings. The city's infrastructure was worse than anyone had expected. Centuries of neglect and seismic instability had compromised key systems, including the energy grids and the barriers that kept the crushing ocean pressure at bay. "This isn't a patch job," Max announced bluntly, his voice cutting through the room. "Your whole system needs an overhaul. If we don't act fast, this place will be rubble in 6 months. Vorin's fins bristled. "Human, you forget yourself. We have survived for millennia without your interference." Max folded his arms. "And look where that's gotten you." Aurea raised a hand, silencing the growing murmurs of dissent. "Mr. Carter, we are aware of our plight. What do you propose?" Max launched into an explanation, his hands gesturing animatedly as he detailed a plan to stabilize the city. As he spoke, Aurea found herself drawn to his passion. He was different from her people, brash, unrefined, and deeply human. Yet, there was a fire in him, a determination that resonated with something deep inside her. The council was less impressed. As the meeting adjourned, Aurea approached Max privately. "You speak with conviction," she said, "but your methods may alienate my people." Max shrugged. "I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to fix your city." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Perhaps, Mr. Carter, you and I are not so different." As Max and his team began their work, tensions in Clarus continued to mount. The Earth delegation's presence was a divisive issue. Many Merosians viewed the humans as interlopers, while others saw them as the planet's last hope. Unbeknownst to Aurea, a faction within the council sought to sabotage the alliance. Vorin, though loyal to the throne, was torn. He saw the humans as a necessary evil but feared their influence on Aurea and their world. One evening, as Max worked late in the city's primary control center, he was joined by Aurea. She watched him in silence for a moment, fascinated by the way his hands deftly manipulated alien technology. "Do all humans work with such fervor?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Only the ones who care," he replied without looking up. Then he paused, glancing at her. "What about you? Do you care enough to take risks?" She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "This city's falling apart because your people are too afraid to change. You're different, I can see that. But are you willing to fight for it?" Her bioluminescent eyes met his, and for the first time, she saw not just a human but an ally. "Perhaps, Max Carter, you are more Merosian than you realize." As their gazes lingered, the soft hum of the control center was shattered by an explosion in the distance. The city trembled, and alarms blared. Someone had sabotaged one of the structural pylons. Aurea's face hardened. "It seems our enemies are bolder than we thought." Max grabbed his gear. "Then let's show them what happens when you fight for something worth saving." The explosion's shockwaves reverberated through the waters, rattling the fragile structures of Clarus. Aurea and Max rushed to the scene, weaving through throngs of panicked Merosians. The damaged pylon had been a critical part of the energy grid, and its failure had destabilized nearby buildings, forcing hundreds of citizens to evacuate. Max's voice crackled over his suit's communicator. "That wasn't just wear and tear," someone planted charges. "This was deliberate." Aurea clenched her fists, her fins rippling with agitation. "Who would sabotage their own city? Our people depend on these pylons for survival. Someone who doesn't want Earth involved." Max replied grimly. "Where I come from, politics gets messy when people are desperate." Vorin approached, his expression severe. "Your Highness, we must convene the council immediately. This attack threatens not only our city but the very fabric of our governance." Aurea nodded. "I'll address the council, but first, I need answers." "Max, can you determine how this was done?" Max was already inspecting the remains of the pylon. "Give me an hour." Back at the council chamber, Aurea faced a storm of dissent. The explosion had reignited tensions between the traditionalists, who opposed Earth's presence, and the progressives, who believed cooperation was the only way forward. "This is what happens when we invite outsiders into our home," roared Councillor Jorith, his fins flaring with anger. "They bring their chaos and disrupt our way of life." Aurea raised her voice, her tone firm but measured. "This destruction was not caused by Earth. It was the work of our own people, traitors who would rather see Clarus fall than accept change." Vorin stepped forward. "And yet, Your Highness, the presence of these humans has emboldened dissenters. Their methods, while effective, are disruptive." Aurea turned to him, her bioluminescent eyes glowing with resolve. "Disruption is precisely what we need. Vorin, stagnation brought us to this brink. If we do not adapt, we will perish." The chamber fell silent. For a moment, even Jorith seemed cowed. But the silence was short-lived as murmurs of discontent rippled through the council. Meanwhile, Max had traced the explosive residue to a type of chemical unique to Clarus black market. The substance was rare, used only in mining operations, which narrowed the list of suspects. He relayed his findings to Aurea, who ordered a covert investigation. As the days passed, Max and Aurea found themselves working side by side more often. While Aurea navigated the treacherous waters of politics, Max focused on stabilizing the city's infrastructure. Their growing rapport did not go unnoticed. One evening, as they reviewed plans for reinforcing the city's protective barriers, Oria asked, "Do humans always work with such urgency?" Max chuckled. "We're a restless species, always in a rush to build, break, and rebuild." "Your creativity is remarkable," she admitted. "My people are skilled artisans, but we lack your ability to innovate in the face of crisis." Max leaned back, his eyes meeting hers. "Maybe that's why you asked for help. Sometimes, it takes an outsider to see things differently." Her fins fluttered slightly, a Morosian gesture of amusement. "You're bold, Max Carter. Perhaps too bold." "Boldness isn't always a bad thing," he replied with a grin. "Sometimes, it's exactly what's needed." Their exchange was interrupted by a message from Vorin. The investigation had yielded a lead. A cache of explosives had been found in an abandoned outpost near the city's outskirts. Max and Oria exchanged a glance. "Looks like we've got work to do," he said. The outpost was a relic of an earlier era, its coral walls crumbling and overgrown with bioluminescent algae. Max, Oria, and a small team of guards approached cautiously, their lights cutting through the murky water. Inside, they discovered evidence of a secret meeting place, maps of the city, plans for additional sabotage, and a sigil that Oria recognized immediately. "This symbol," she whispered, her voice tinged with sorrow, "it belongs to the Tidal Veil, a radical group that believes isolation is the key to our survival." Max studied the maps. "These guys aren't just angry, they're organized. They've mapped out all your weak points." Before Oria could respond, a shadow moved in the distance. A sleek figure darted through the water, vanishing before the guards could react. "Someone's here," Max muttered, drawing a sonic disruptor from his suit. "Let's split up and flush them out." The team spread through the outpost, their lights sweeping over the ruins. As Max moved deeper into the structure, he felt the water grow colder, the silence heavier. Suddenly, a figure lunged at him from the shadows. Max fired his disruptor, sending a shockwave through the water. The attacker, a Morosian clad in dark armor, faltered but recovered quickly, striking out with a blade. Max dodged, his exosuit absorbing the impact as he tackled the assailant. By the time the guards arrived, the attacker had been subdued. Oria's expression darkened as she approached. "Who sent you?" she demanded. The assailant remained silent, his gills fluttering defiantly. Oria signaled to her guards, "Take him to the holding chambers. We will get our answers." Back in Clarus, the tension between Earth and Meos continued to escalate. The sabotage had shaken the fragile trust between the two factions, and whispers of rebellion grew louder. Oria and Max, however, were undeterred. They pressed on with their efforts to rebuild the city, knowing that time was running out. As they worked together, their bond deepened, an unspoken understanding growing between them. One evening, as they stood atop a newly reinforced tower, Oria spoke quietly. "Max, do you ever regret coming here?" He glanced at her, surprised by the vulnerability in her tone. "Not for a second." "What about you? Do you regret asking for help?" She hesitated before answering. "No, but I worry about what it might cost." Max reached out, his hand brushing against hers. "Sometimes, change is worth the risk." For a moment, the weight of their responsibilities faded, and they stood together, two souls from different worlds united by a common purpose. But beneath the serene waters of Clarus, darker forces were stirring, and their fight was far from over. The interrogation of the captured saboteur yielded troubling revelations. Under the subtle yet relentless questioning of Vorin, the prisoner revealed that the tidal veil was far more widespread and influential than anyone had suspected. Their leader, a charismatic dissenter named Clarus, had promised to restore Morosian independence by driving the humans away and dismantling the monarchy itself. "They see Earth as an invader," Vorin explained in a private meeting with Oria and Max, "and they view your alliance with the humans, Your Highness, as a betrayal of everything Meos stands for." Oria's expression was grim. "Their anger blinds them to the truth. If we cannot stabilize the city, there will be no Meos left to preserve." Max, who had been quietly reviewing blueprints, finally spoke. If Kaylees wants to sabotage the city, he'll target the main power conduits next. That's your weak link. Oria nodded, her fins twitching in agitation. Then we must act before he does. As preparations to secure the power conduits began, Oria addressed the Merosian public in a rare and heartfelt broadcast. She stood in the Grand Aquadome, her voice calm but resolute as she spoke to her people. We are at a crossroads. Our city falters, not because of the humans, but because we have clung too tightly to the past. The alliance with Earth is not a sign of weakness. It is a beacon of hope. Together, we can rebuild Clarus into a city that will endure for generations. Her words resonated with some, but the fractures within Merosian society were deep. In the streets, clashes broke out between loyalists and Tidal Vale sympathizers. The tension became palpable, like an undercurrent pulling the city toward disaster. Max watched the broadcast from the control center, admiration flickering in his eyes. She's got guts, he muttered to himself. Indeed, Vorin replied, surprising Max. The advisor's tone was cautious but approving. Her Highness carries the weight of an entire world. It is not an easy burden. Max shrugged. She's tougher than she looks. Vorin's gaze lingered on him. And you, Mr. Carter? What burdens do you carry? Max hesitated, then deflected with a grin. Just a toolbox and a bad attitude. As expected, Kaylees and his followers made their move. Late one evening, alarms blared across Clarus as sabotage was detected near the central power conduits, a sprawling complex of crystalline machinery that regulated the city's energy. Max and Oria led the response team, racing through the shimmering pathways to intercept the attackers. The conduits were located in a cavernous chamber lit by the eerie glow of bioreactive crystals. As they arrived, they found Tidal Vale operatives planting charges along the conduits. Stop them, Oria commanded, her voice echoing through the water. A chaotic battle ensued. The Merosian guards, armed with energy lances, engaged the saboteurs in a flurry of darting movements. Max, unarmed but resourceful, used his exosuit's tools to disable explosives and disarm attackers. Oria fought with a grace that belied her royal bearing, her movements swift and precise. Amid the chaos, Kaylees revealed himself. He was a towering figure, his bioluminescent scales glowing with an intensity that matched his fiery rhetoric. You've betrayed your people, Oria, he shouted. And for what? These humans will destroy everything we are. Oria confronted him, her voice unwavering. You destroy our future with your hatred. Kaylees, look around you. Our city is dying. We cannot survive alone. Kaylees sneered. You lack the vision to see the truth. Meos belongs to us, and us alone. Their confrontation was cut short as one of Kaylees' operatives activated a failsafe. The remaining charges detonated, causing a catastrophic breach in the conduits. A powerful shockwave rippled through the chamber, throwing everyone off balance. As water began to flood the chamber, Max shouted, We've got to seal this place. Now. With the power conduits critically damaged, the city faced an imminent collapse. Max scrambled to stabilize the systems, but the damage was too extensive. Oria, bleeding from a shallow wound on her arm, stood beside him. What do we do? She asked, her voice tinged with desperation. Max scanned the controls. There's an override, a manual shutdown, but it's at the central core. Someone's got to go in there and pull the plug. Oria understood immediately. It's a suicide mission. Max shook his head. Not if we're quick, but I'll need someone to buy me time. I will go, Oria said without hesitation. Max grabbed her wrist. Not happening. Princess, your people need you alive. They need you alive, too, she replied, her gaze unwavering. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow around them, the weight of their choices hanging heavy in the water. Finally, Max relented. Fine, but we do this together. The central core was a labyrinth of glowing conduits and pulsating energy. Max worked quickly, his hands deftly maneuvering through alien technology as Oria fended off the remaining saboteurs. The water around them grew darker, heavier, as the city's systems began to fail. "We're running out of time," Oria called out. Her voice strained as she parried an attacker's blade. "Almost there," Max shouted back, his fingers flying over the controls. Finally, with a triumphant cry, he pulled the final lever, initiating the shutdown sequence. The core shuddered, then went dark. The immediate danger was over, but the city's power was now fully offline. Clarus would need to be rebuilt from the ground up. Back in the Grand Aquadome, Oria addressed her people once more. The rebellion had been quelled, but the scars remained. She spoke of unity, of resilience, and of a new future for Meos, one built on cooperation, not fear. Max, standing at the edge of the crowd, watched her with quiet admiration. She had risen to the occasion in ways he hadn't expected, and he found himself wondering what more she was capable of. As the crowd dispersed, Oria approached him. "You saved my people, Max Carter. I cannot thank you enough." "You saved them too," he replied. "We make a good team." She smiled, a rare warmth in her usually guarded expression. "Perhaps we do." Their moment was interrupted by Vorin. "Your Highness, the council awaits." Oria nodded, her gaze lingering on Max for a moment longer. "Until next time," she said, her voice soft. Max watched her go, his thoughts conflicted. He had come to Meos to fix a city. He hadn't expected to lose a piece of his heart in the process. The weeks that followed were grueling. With the city's power grid offline, life in Clarus became a delicate balance between survival and restoration. Emergency systems sustained the most critical areas, but the people of Meos faced food shortages, unstable housing, and frayed nerves. Yet amid the chaos, a fragile sense of unity began to take hold. Princess Oria had taken a hands-on role in the rebuilding efforts, much to the surprise of her people. She worked tirelessly alongside the Earth engineers and Merosian citizens, repairing conduits, patching energy barriers, and overseeing resource allocation. Her visibility on the front lines inspired a cautious optimism among her people, though whispers of dissent still lingered in the currents. Max Carter, on the other hand, had earned the respect and grudging admiration of many Merosians. His practical ingenuity and refusal to back down, even in the face of their skepticism, made him an unlikely hero. But Max found himself grappling with deeper questions. His time on Meos had begun to change him, forcing him to reconsider his own ideals and his growing attachment to Oria. Late one evening, Max found Oria at the edge of a collapsed plaza overlooking the shimmering remains of the city. She stood silent and still, her bioluminescent robes glowing faintly in the dim light. He approached cautiously, his exosuit making faint mechanical sounds with each step. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, breaking the silence. She turned, her expression soft but distant. "I often come here to think. The city was once so vibrant. Now, it feels as though it is a reflection of my failures." Max leaned against a cracked column. "You can't carry all of this on your shoulders. Princess, you didn't cause this mess. You're the one trying to fix it." "Perhaps," she said, her voice heavy with doubt. "But a leader bears the weight of her people's pain, regardless of who is to blame." Max hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Back on Earth, I've worked on projects that failed, bridges that collapsed, buildings that didn't stand the test of time. But I learned something. Failure isn't the end. It's the start of rebuilding something stronger." She studied him for a moment, her eyes reflecting a quiet gratitude. "You always know how to reframe things, Max Carter. It is refreshing." "Guess I'm just full of surprises," he replied, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Their gazes lingered, and for a brief moment, the barriers of culture and responsibility melted away. But before either could speak further, Vorin's voice crackled through Max's communicator. "Carter, Your Highness, we have a situation. You are needed at the main council chamber immediately." The council chamber was alive with tension when Oria and Max arrived. Vorin stood at the center of the room, his usual calm demeanor strained. Beside him was a Merosian courier, her fins trembling with nervous energy. "What's going on?" Oria asked, her voice sharp with urgency. Vorin gestured to the courier. "She brings news from the deep rift expanse. a remote region of Meos untouched by the city's currents. The tidal veil is regrouping there. Kales is alive, and he has begun rallying other dissident factions. The courier added. He claims the collapse of the power grid is proof that Earth's influence is poison. Many believe him. Max swore under his breath. That guy just doesn't quit, does he? Vorin ignored him. We cannot allow Kales to gain momentum. If his forces grow, they will plunge Meos into civil war. Oria's fins quivered with anger. Then we must stop him before it comes to that. Vorin, assemble a strike team. We will neutralize him and his followers. Max frowned. Hold on. You can't just march into this guy's territory and expect a clean fight. He knows the terrain, and he's got the numbers. If you want to stop him, you'll need a better plan. Vorin bristled. And what would you suggest? Human? Diplomacy? Max shrugged. Diplomacy's not my strong suit, but I do know how to outthink a problem. Let me come with you. Oria raised a hand to quell Vorin's protests. Max's perspective has been invaluable before. He will join us. The journey to the deep rift expanse was perilous. The waters grew darker and colder as the team descended into the abyss, their submersibles navigating treacherous currents and jagged underwater canyons. The region was a stark contrast to the vibrant, if damaged, beauty of Clarus. Here, the ocean was a vast, oppressive void. As they neared their destination, Vorin shared more about Kales' operations. The dissidents had fortified themselves within a series of submerged caves, using stolen technology to create a hidden stronghold. Max studied the schematics on his suit's interface. If we can take out their command hub, the rest of their operation will crumble. But we'll need to move fast. They'll see us coming. Oria nodded. Then we must ensure they do not see us at all. The strike team infiltrated the caves under the cover of darkness. Their bioluminescent lights dimmed to avoid detection. Max and Oria worked in tandem, disabling traps and neutralizing sentries as they made their way toward the command hub. But Kales had anticipated their arrival. As they reached the central chamber, they were ambushed by a wave of dissident fighters. A fierce battle erupted, the confined space amplifying the chaos. Energy lances clashed, and sonic disruptors hummed as both sides fought for control. Amid the fray, Max confronted Kales. The rebel leader loomed over him, his sheer size and ferocity making him a formidable opponent. Kales sneered. You think you can save Meos with your crude human ingenuity? You are nothing but an invader. Max dodged a swing of Kales' blade, countering with a powerful shockwave from his suit. I'm not here to save your planet, pal. I'm here to save her people. Their fight was brutal, but Max's resourcefulness ultimately gave him the upper hand. With a final surge of energy, he disarmed Kales and pinned him against a jagged wall. Call off your followers. Max growled. This is over. But Kales only laughed. This is far from over. Before Max could respond, an explosion rocked the chamber. Kales had triggered a failsafe, collapsing the structure around them. Max and Oria barely escaped with their lives as the caves crumbled, forcing the remaining dissidents to retreat. With Kales captured and the rebellion quelled, Clarus had a chance to rebuild in earnest. The city's power grid was slowly restored, and a renewed sense of hope began to take hold among its people. Oria and Max stood together atop a newly reinforced tower, overlooking the glowing spires of the recovering city. The tension of the past weeks had given way to a quiet camaraderie. You've done it, Max said, his voice tinged with pride. We've done it, Oria corrected, her gaze softening. Meos owes you a great debt. Max Carter. He smirked. Does that mean I get a discount on the next job? She laughed, a sound like the gentle ripple of water. Perhaps. But for now, I hope you will stay. There is much work left to do. Max hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I think I will. As they stood side by side, the ocean seemed brighter, its currents alive with the promise of a new beginning. Months passed, and the city of Clarus began to shine once more. The coral towers, now reinforced and vibrant with new energy, glowed against the eternal twilight of the Morosian Ocean. The people, though scarred by the rebellion, had found common ground in the shared effort to rebuild. The alliance between Earth and Meos had strengthened, with human ingenuity and Merosian craftsmanship blending to create innovations neither could have achieved alone. Max Carter had become an unlikely fixture in Clarus. Though he often joked about missing the surface, he had grown to love the Merosian world, the culture, the people, and, most of all, its princess. One evening, Aurea invited Max to a secluded reef far from the bustling city. The area was serene, lit by the gentle glow of bioluminescent coral and schools of translucent fish. She wore simple robes, her royal regalia left behind, and Max had traded his heavy exosuit for a lighter, sleeker version. "I wanted to thank you," she said softly as they floated together, "not just for saving my people, but for showing me what is possible when we trust the unknown." Max grinned. "I think I should be thanking you. Before I came here, I didn't think there was much left to believe in." They drifted in silence for a moment, the current carrying them gently. Finally, Aurea turned to him, her bioluminescent eyes shining with an intensity that made Max's breath catch. "My people once believed that our hearts were tethered to the tides," she said, "that we are only truly free when we find someone who flows with us." Max blinked, uncharacteristically at a loss for words. "Are you saying?" She smiled, her fins fluttering slightly. "I am saying that the tides brought you to me for a reason, Max Carter, and I am glad they did." Max laughed, a sound filled with relief and joy. "Well, I guess that makes me the luckiest guy in two worlds." Not long after, Aurea was officially crowned as Queen of Meos in a grand ceremony attended by her people and the Earth delegation. The event marked the first time humans and Merosians had gathered in unity, a testament to the partnership forged in adversity. As Aurea stood before the crowd, her voice carried strength and warmth. "Today, we celebrate more than a coronation. We celebrate a new chapter for Meos, a future built on resilience, innovation, and trust. Together, we will thrive." Max watched from the sidelines, a rare smile playing on his lips. For once, he didn't feel like the outsider in the room. He was home. In the years that followed, Meos became a beacon of collaboration between Earth and its newfound allies. The technology developed in the rebuilding of Clarus revolutionized underwater engineering and energy sustainability across the galaxy. The alliance inspired other worlds to seek partnerships, proving that even in the vastness of space, unity was possible. Max Carter stayed on Meos, continuing to work alongside Aurea as both her chief engineer and her most trusted confidant. Though their relationship defied tradition, it became a symbol of the harmony between their peoples. As they stood together at the edge of the city one evening, watching the currents carry new life through the vibrant waters, Aurea spoke softly. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come to Meos?" Max wrapped an arm around her, his smile widening. "Not really. I figure the tides would have brought us together eventually." She laughed, the sound echoing through the water like music. And for the first time in generations, the oceans of Meos felt truly at peace.